Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional, a well-known marketer from Dallas, Texas, Mr. Michael E. Egan, PhD, FIMC. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Michael,
to be here.
Thank you. Michael is the Chief Executive Officer of Michael Egan Marketing Incorporated. So, Michael, before we talk marketing, tell me a little bit about your own journey and how has your academic background influenced your approach to marketing?
Well, that's a very interesting question because my background is I'm trained as a neurophysiologist,
Yep.
in particular, an invertebrate neurophysiology.
Yeah.
What does a physiologist do? A physiologist is deeply concerned with how things work, particularly living things. And I've had a very interesting career, made a lot of different changes and played in a lot of different puddles. I started out, for example, as a French horn player. And the country, including the University of Texas at Austin, Lawrence University, Princeton University, St. Edward's University, at any rate. An opportunity arose in the early, when was it? In the late 70s, early 80s, new technology began to emerge, which really confounded the industries that had to distribute them, notably magnetic resonance spectroscopy. And unlike X-ray machines, MRI machines do not make pictures by casting some kind of X-ray or visible energy. It's actually like a symphony orchestra, and you can actually tell where the French horns are playing and where the oboes are playing because it's spectroscopy. Spectroscopy was a tool I knew very well, and so it was an interesting opportunity for me to, as some have said, go to the dark side. What I found, much to my amazement, was that physiology, which is how things work, and marketing, which is how business works, are exactly the same kind of discipline. And much to my delight, they use the same metrics. In fact, the textbook that I use for statistical reference is biometry and not a business statistic book. The names of the formulas change, but the way they work and the insight they give you is exactly the same. So that's how I came into the field. I moved through several things. I ran a software company that provided operational software for pharmacies across the United States. And I got fired from that job because I had a dispute with the Canadian owners. And that led me to establishing a consulting career. But what I really enjoyed was not running companies, but figuring out what was broken.
Right.
So that's my story in short.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And you obviously spent a lot of time in marketing. So our conversation today will be on marketing and branding.
That's good.
But tell me a little bit, Michael, about the importance of branding in the healthcare sector. And you focused a lot on the healthcare sector.
I've done a great deal of work in the healthcare sector. What is branding anyway? Branding fundamentally is a promise to the consumer, the client, whoever you want to call him or her, of what you have to offer. And branding as a promise is absolutely essential in healthcare because so much of what an individual experiences in healthcare depends on trust. And that promise was broken too easily. And it revolves around in healthcare, in my opinion, four critical elements.
Right.
The first is expectation. In fact, I have found in my marketing career that the most important attribute to measure whenever you're trying to find out how a company is doing is don't ask them how satisfied you are as a customer. Ask them what your expectations are.
Right.
Were they met? What are the expectations in healthcare? Number one, respect me. Treat me as an individual. Treat me with dignity. Involve me in my care. It is my body, after all. You know, the old saying, the only difference between major surgery and minor surgery, major surgery is mine.
Right.
And finally, listen. my most common advice to anyone in healthcare is talk with your ears first. So branding is absolutely essential, and it's one of the hardest things to do because it involves trust in a marketplace which is so crowded with time and expectations. I mean, how much time does a physician really have to spend with you before you develop that trust? So that, in a nutshell, it's essential.
Fascinating. And Michael, what in your view are some of the common mistakes healthcare companies or companies make in their marketing strategy?
I think the biggest mistake is they have unrealistic expectations. I worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and startups, and they always say, well, gee, all I need is 5% market share and I've got it made.
Yes.
Well, how hard is it going to be to get that 5%?
Yeah.
And anyone needs my product or anyone needs my service. Are you sure? Who would pay for it? I think that's a terribly, terribly big mistake. The second thing, particularly in healthcare, is insufficient and simplistic marketing communication. I once had an opportunity to meet and talk and work with Kotler from the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
Is it Chicago? Anyway, the father of modern marketing. At any rate, and he and I were talking. He was coming to Dallas to give a seminar on marketing is broken. And he was really enchanted with my background as a PhD in neurophysiology, working in MRI and all kinds of medical technology. And he said the problem with marketing is that it's been dumbed down. And I have been very successful because I don't dumb it down. I mean, when I sit down with a bunch of doctors, there's always a test. They'll throw out some 10-syllable word, and I say, yeah, and did you happen to notice the ba-da-ba-dee-boo-dee-bop-bop? And oh, now I'm trusted. I understand your lingo. So I think that's the second biggest problem is failure to really use the right marketing communication. Don't sugarcoat it.
Right.
I think that a third mistake, particularly in device companies and particularly in software companies, is that they assume that sales and marketing are the same. They are not. Marketing is fertilizing the ground, pulling the weeds, planting the seeds, watering them, harvesting, baking them, transporting to market. I mean, the sales is getting the deal. And they're very different enterprises. Oh, sales is very important, don't get me wrong. I think the second biggest problem is failure to meet expectations. So many healthcare organizations and medical device manufacturers and software companies think that, well, gee, I have the greatest solution for scheduling. I have the greatest solution for managing payroll. Well, are they doing that? I mean, I can tell you the number of times I've sat down and somebody shows me a brochure they've done. If I say, God, who did that? I've insulted them. Instead, I ask, what problems do you have? Where are you missing the mark? What keeps you up, so to speak? I think the third problem is not recognizing a realistic target audience. And that's particularly complicated in healthcare because there are so many decision makers that are not buying the product and signing on the purchase order, but recommending it. And if you don't have a clear understanding of who makes decisions, who recommends decisions, who determines their feasibility, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think perhaps the most important thing that's missing is an understanding of what's the difference between market needs and product features. Because often you'll have a solution to a problem that people don't have.
Very interesting. Well said. Great response. My next question, Michael, is how do you approach the development of a branding and positioning strategy for a large organization?
First of all, you have to talk with your ears. You can't go in with any predetermined expectations. Oh, I've seen your clinic around the corner. Oh, I'm familiar with what the technology is you're using. You can't do that because what you can't learn by asking Dr. Google, who knows everything. You can't learn what the culture of the company is. You can't learn what the attitudes are about employees, as well as clients and customers and suppliers. And until you know that, you can't create the promise that is a brand. But you have to do your work. You can't do it blindly. And you have to start by listening. Then you have to explore what the market expects from those things you heard. And that's a complicated situation, but it's fun.
Right.
It's really fun.
Well said. And my next question is, very often I've seen marketing strategies are prepared by organizations, but they're not necessarily aligned with the business goals that the stakeholders want. And I love your phrase, listen, talk with your ears. I'd love to get your perspective, and how do you ensure marketing strategies are aligned with overall business goals?
Well, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And I wish that clients would take my advice more often, because they don't. Alignment is a matter of consensus building, trust development, and ensuring that everyone in the team, from the C-level to their direct reports and everyone in between, is on the same page.
Right.
I've also done quite a bit of academic research in ecology, by the way. In fact, I'm an author of a really seminal piece of work that I did as a graduate student.
Amazing.
Talking about what a niche is and the whole idea of competition. And I'll tell you my secret. My secret is the gut. Give up time. From my view, both the natural world and the business world comes in two primary forms.
Right.
There's a fine-grained world, like a jungle. There's a coarse-grained world, like a desert. And both are inhabited by very successful companies, if you will. In a fine-grained world, like a street in New York City, there's a lot of choices, a lot of things happening all the time. Or you get down into the medical device business, where there are 5 major players in the MRI world. Everywhere in the entire world, there's 150 sales worldwide every year. I mean, you're talking about a desert.
Yeah.
And so the question about gut is, how long do you pursue opportunities? And is the organization ready to do that or not before you give up?
Right.
In a fine-grained environment, you have to give up pretty darn quick, because if you don't get it, the competitor will first. And so you have to know what a tasty morsel is, what a deal is. You have to know who your client is, what they want to buy, why they want to buy, what their expectations are. And so you have to be prepared and nimble. On the other hand, you have to be nimble in a coarse-grained environment as well, because there are very few target audiences, prey, if you will. And so you can't give up very easily. You have to be persistent. You have to be diligent. You have to be resilient, and you just can't get your feelings hurt when the door is slammed in your face. You have to be resourceful, creative, in fact, very creative. I'm sure you felt that when you were working in some of the big tech companies. And the airline industry, I mean, that's a place that is as coarse, great. 2 competitors in the world, give me a break.
Absolutely.
So alignment is helping, if you're consulting, the organization to recognize what kind of operation they have, who their clients are, what their expectations is. How do you do that? Well, as Peter Drucker said, you can't manage it if you can't measure it. So you have to listen to the market. You have to do market research. You have to talk to your clients. The best research you can do is to ask your client, how am I doing?
Correct.
Oh, did you get what you wanted?
Absolutely.
Oh, what you expected?
Absolutely. And I'm going to, that, your response gives me a good segue, because my next question is on market research. What is your approach to market research, Michael? And how does market research help in identifying market needs and expectations?
Boy, that's a big question. I always start a conversation about marketing and research with two questions. What do you want to know?
Right.
Well, I want to know how many competitors are in the market, what their pricing is, how large their staff is, what kind of culture they have, what kind of resources they have. Dr. Google can tell me a whole lot about the company. I mean, there's ask and ye shall find. Okay. How will you use it? Those are two key questions. Oh, get rid of the need, the want to know, and just focus on the need to know, the things that you have to know in order to measure expectations.
Right.
When we sit down and start drafting out what those things are, we have to be very careful to weed out those, gee, I want to know that. It'd be nice to know. Well, if you want to just feel good, I've got a good bottle of Cabernet that I could recommend. But if you need to know it, we've got to go out and find the answers.
Yeah.
And we can't just do it haphazardly. We got to make sure we cover all of the bases. We capture a broad enough range of opinions and potential resources that we have a clear picture.
Right.
The second thing I do is what methodology shall we use? Today, in fact, I think in part due to COVID, qualitative market research has exploded in possibilities.
Right.
The power of artificial intelligence to turn qualitative discussion into quantitative data is really powerful.
Absolutely.
But the real answer is, in terms of methodology, is you have to match that to the persona of the individuals that you want to ask questions of. For example, if you're talking about things that are personally sensitive, for example, in healthcare, we frequently want to know whether or not a particular kind of pathology is needed by a community. Well, that's a pretty darn personal issue. And people don't, well, they're happy to give you advice, but they're not going to open up and tell you their most sensitive personal issues.
Right.
In fact, I often use my PhD in situations where that kind of trust is important. And those kinds of discussions need to be one-on-one. You can't have a group discussion about those kinds of issues. If you're talking about compensation, how much did you make? Oh, a lot more than you. Really? How much was that? I'm not going to tell you. So you have to define not only how you approach the issue, but what tools you use to ask. Again, you have to talk with your ears. So once you've found the right questions and you've found a methodology, you have to judge between whether you want to do a qualitative approach or a quantitative.
Correct.
What's the difference? Well, traditionally, market researchers start with qualitative because they want to understand what the underlying depth of issues are.
Correct.
You want to dig down deep into the soul of the respondent and find out what they like, what they don't. My favorite question in a focus group is you've gotten through all of the issues, you've carefully selected individuals which match the market by experience, demographics, age, gender, whatever. And you've gone through all of those issues, and then you just sit back and hand them a blank piece of paper. You say, okay, we came here to ask you blah, blah, blah. What's your advice? And it's amazing. People will put down things that you didn't mention in the discussion. And it's probably the most valuable tool that I use in market. And I use that, by the way, on quantitative research as well. But people love to opine.
Yeah.
like I'm doing now. So
yeah. Well said.
At any rate, you want to use quantitative market research when you want to know the breadth of a market. How far into the demographic profiles, how far into the ethnic profiles, how far into the ethnographic profiles, a particular expectation by the market can be provided. And so you have to balance those two. And then the big bugaboo, how much does it cost? I can't tell you the number of times that I have told a client, this is not worth the price.
Correct.
Because you have an answer already in that they're buying it. Find out why they're buying it. Find out why they're using it, or find out why they're not. In fact, I spend a whole lot more time in my analysis looking at negative answers rather than positive, because they will give you deeper insight into where the problems are.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know the problems, they're going to continue to bite you.
Very well said. So time for one more question, Michael. Given your vast experience in marketing and as a consultant, can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of ethical standards when it comes to healthcare marketing?
I think it's at the absolute top of the stack. Because if you don't have integrity and you can't be honest and you can't tell your client that the client's the problem, you will get nowhere, because you've lost all your trust. You've lost all of your credibility. I am honored, frankly, to have been awarded the designation Fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants. This is a global organization that is founded on an absolute standard of ethics in business, doing what's right, whether it's wrong in the view of your opponents, whether you're crossing a line, you do not cross them. You just don't do it. It's absolutely the cornerstone of everything I do.
That's said. So I've got time for one last question, and I have to ask you this for a lot of our young viewers and listeners. What would you say are a few lessons that new marketers can take away from you?
Well, I would give them the same advice that I give my children.
Okay.
You've got to take your hat off to get a haircut.
Okay.
You've got to learn to make mistakes. That's the only way you learn.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Read. Learn. And probably the most important thing, talk with your ears. Learn to ask good questions.
Very interesting.
Good questions are far better than a statement. Let me tell you my secret formula, and I didn't learn this myself, but I learned it from one of the chief executives of one of the major big box hardware stores. So 7 magic words. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. And on that note, Michael, I just want to say, with your amazing 5 lessons, take your hat off for a haircut, learn to make mistakes, learn, talk with your ears, and ask good questions. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of branding and marketing, market research, qualitative and quantitative research. I think we covered a lot of ground on marketing from your incredible experience and your very, very wise words. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you. And thank you so much for including me in this. I enjoy that. You ask great questions, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.